Hi, I'm Pamela, and this is episode 3 of the Fiber Sprite podcast. This podcast is all about fiber arts, whether it's knitting, spinning, weaving, dyeing, or something else. So today I'm filming this, and it is the first day of fall, which means it's sweater weather. Sweater weather. Woohoo! Anyways, so it has been a really hot summer here in Western Colorado, and it's finally cooled off to where I'm not melting and I can wear sweaters in the morning and in the afternoon. So I'm pretty excited for that. And this sweater that I'm wearing today is my Weekender sweater. The pattern is by Andrea Mowry, and the yarn is some of my hand spun. And this project was partly knitting a whole sweater with hand spun. It was partly tracking a project in terms of time and resources from start to finish. And it was also learning how to use my knitting machine. So I've had a knitting machine for a couple of years now, and I'm really still in the process of fully understanding how it works. So a lot of people think, oh, a knitting machine, it'll make your knitting a lot faster. And it depends on the machine and it depends on your skills. And it's not an immediate translation between knowing how to hand knit and knowing how to knit on the machine. And one of the things that surprised me is how much I like this sweater. So a lot of times I sort of shy away from basic sweater knitting patterns because I think they're going to be too simple and too boring. And of course, that is something that's really good for the knitting machine because it's going to be easier to translate into the knitting machine. But another thing that's good about a basic pattern is just that it's going to be so wearable. And even though this is in kind of a bright color, this sweater, I find that it's one of my favorite sweaters, partly because it's one of my favorite colors, but the sweater is so basic that it goes with everything. So we did take a break from podcast episodes that went a little bit longer than I'd planned. We had some family things come up and needed to travel, and then the whole schedule just sort of gets thrown off, right? But in the meantime, I did film a couple of tutorials showing how to use our spinner's multi-tool. So this is the spinner's multi-tool. You use it when you're spinning yarn to check your wraps per inch, which is essentially the thickness of your yarn, or your twist angle. And then these holes are actually used before spinning to diz your fiber. And you can use as much of the multi-tool as you want, or as little of it as you want, but there are now some complete tutorials on how to use that. So if you're a spinner, you should definitely check that out. So while we were traveling, I did get quite a lot of knitting done. Unfortunately, I did not pack all of the yarn that I needed for this, but this is the Camaro Sweater. I've talked about this before. And one of the good things that kind of forced me to do a step that I didn't necessarily like was that we were on a trip and I didn't have a ton of other projects that I could work on. So there's a lot of shaping that goes into making this V shape, this chevron shape, but it doesn't continue down the body. It's not a triangular shape at the hem. And so the way that that's done is with short rows. So you do a lot of short rows to catch the back up to the front, and they were tedious. And if I had had anything else to work on, I probably would have. But on our trip, I did get through that, and this week I finished the hem, and so now I'm onto the sleeves. So because my gauge was a little bit different than what was called for in the pattern, especially my row gauge was really compressed, I needed to change how I was going to knit the sleeves, how many decreases I needed to do. And so to do that, what I did was the sleeve ended about here on me, where I separated the yoke from the body. And I want the sleeves to be about this long on me. So I took a tape measure with my elbow slightly bent and ran the tape measure around the outside of my elbow to where I wanted the sleeve to end. And so what that does is it gets you your measurement for how much more you need to knit, and then I multiplied that times my gauge, the number of rows per inch that I was getting. Now the pattern wanted me to knit for a few inches, so I subtracted that many inches because that wasn't going to go into the decreases, and then I also subtracted the section that I wanted for the cuff because I usually knit that pretty straight. So then I had the number of rows that I had to decrease over, and I knew the number of stitches that I needed to decrease, or the number of times that I needed to decrease. So I just divided that into the number of rows and got the number. And so instead of decreasing every 10 rows, I'm probably going to be decreasing every 13, 14 rows. So just because you're not quite getting gauge doesn't mean you can't knit a sweater pattern. You just might need to do a little bit more math, and that's totally doable and totally workable. And it's good to remember to do that before you've knit something that doesn't fit. So the next thing that I have, I've talked about this before, but this is the completed skeins of Berry's Jubilee. So I have basically 4 different things in here. So the first thing that I spun on my match list was this, and this is Berry's Jubilee as it comes. So I didn't do any color manipulation, I just spun it as it came. And then the next one that I spun, I had 2 more braids of this colorway, and I separated them by color. So I took out the purples and the blues, and I spun a skein of all purples and blues. And then I went to my drum carder and I blended all of the golds together, and I added in more fibers that were similar to this colorway. So I sort of stretched out the fiber supply a little bit by adding in more. And then there were whites and grays. So I didn't fully separate all of the purples and all of the golds out. So the middle sections were quite pale. Some of them were a little bit gray, but some of them were really pretty white. And then by mixing the purples and the golds together with those whites, I got this really wonderful silver gray. And with this one, I did also extend it with some other fiber that I had in my stash. So this is probably close to about 4,000 yards of yarn, and I'm going to weave something with it. I don't know what, I don't know when, but that's all done. So I'm pretty excited for that. And the next thing that I'm going to be spinning is some of my hand-dyed yarn fiber, and this is Southdown. I didn't order a whole lot of it because I wanted to test it. Southdown is known for being really springy. It's one of the down breeds, and apparently it's resistant to felting, so it's really good for socks. Even when the wool hasn't been superwashed, it's supposed to be resistant to felting. So I'm going to spin a 3-ply yarn and knit up a pair of socks and report back. So this fiber will be available in the shop, but there's a very limited supply, and this colorway is not repeatable. So if that's something that you think you'd like, it is in the shop, but there's not going to be a lot of it. So when it's gone, it's gone. And then I have this, which is a scarf that came off of my loom. The warp I dyed in a workshop last year and have not gotten around to weaving it until now. So the warp is tencel. I don't really like tencel. It's very silky and shiny and smooth, which is part of what people like about it. The other thing that people tend to like about it is that Tencel is basically rayon, but it's produced in the most environmentally friendly way possible, where it's a closed loop process and only 1% of the chemicals used to make the rayon are leaked out of the process. So it's the most sustainable version of rayon you can get, and it does have that silky, shiny look. So while I don't really like Tencel, it's a sweaty fiber for me. It's not as breathable for me. It does have just a really pretty effect in this. And in the class, the teacher recommended that we use a black Tencel for the weft, which is what goes this way. And I tried that and I really didn't like it. So instead I used this sort of burgundy. You can see it at that hem there. And it doesn't compete with the warp. It sort of accents it nicely. And it's a little bit thinner, so it's going to kind of disappear after I wash it. So I just need to do the fringe or decide to do a turned hem on this, and then this will be all done. So that's that. So last weekend I went to the Sneffels Fiber Festival in Ridgway, Colorado. It's a smaller fiber festival, but that's one of the things that I like about it. You can do it in a day. It's not overwhelming. You're probably not going to spend way too much money when you go to one of those huge fiber festivals and, oh, there's this and there's that and there's this, and you sort of lose control of yourself. You can still go through the whole market and see everything and touch everything and talk to everyone. And that's one of the things that I really like about it. And this is the second year that I've gone, and so that you're starting to see familiar faces and get to know people, and that's a really nice aspect of it. So, what did I get? So I was a little bit reserved this year because I am going to another fiber festival. I'm going to Taos in New Mexico in a couple of weeks. But I did get a few things. So this is from the Woolly Lizard in Cortez, Colorado. And this fiber is local. It's from Durango, the Oak Tree Farm. And it is CVM Romaldale wool. And that's just going to be really fun to spin. Another fiber that I got is Southdown. So this is the natural color of the fiber. It is baby doll Southdown, and it is from Balto Farms in Boulder, Colorado, and it is sourced from the Mountains and Plains Fiber Shed. And I will link to who I bought it from, which is Aspen Kid Denver, and her website is Fiber Traveler. And I'm excited to see how this spins up differently than this Southdown. They feel very different in my hand. Not just in the way that the fiber was processed. This one's processed with less chemicals. A lot of the big industrial producers will use pretty harsh chemicals to dissolve the vegetable matter, and this mill that processes this does not do that. So I'm interested to see the differences. And then something fun and different for me is I got these long, beautiful locks from my friends Scott and Joelle at Corn Creek Fibers. And fun fact, Scott is the one who taught me how to spin on a wheel. So this was at my very first fiber festival that I ever went to. And I had spun on a drop spindle before, but I was really ready to get a wheel. And the vendor next to Scott and Joelle had a used wheel for sale, and that's the one that I bought. And he taught me how to spin. So this is going to be fun. Not quite sure what I'm going to do with it, but whatever it is, it's going to be fun. So then, bought some yarn. This is Wensleydale CVM worsted from my friends at Cactus Hill Farm. And she does a really nice job. And this is mill spun yarn, but it's from her sheep. And it's just lovely. It's soft, and it's just a really nice natural gray. So I'm going to do a weaving project with this. There's a project that I've had on a loom, and I've been trying out different wefts, and the weft that I liked, I know that I'm not going to have enough of. And so This is probably the closest that I'm going to get to that. So I'm hoping that this will jumpstart that project. And then the last thing that I got is a sweater quantity of yarn. This is not all of it, but a sweater quantity of yarn from my friends at Jubilee. And they are a sheep farm in Hooper, Colorado. And this is a natural gray. It's a much lighter gray, but it is 70% merino and 30% teeswater. So the micron count of merino is what gives it its softness, and they are getting really, really good micron counts on their merino at 2BU. And so that means that they're getting really soft fiber. And then the teeswater has this luster. It's a long wool and it's got this silky look. So normally merino wools are kind of dull looking. And so by combining the merino with something that's got a little bit more luster, it's got just a little faint sheen to it. So after I finish my Camaro sweater, I'm going to be swatching for something with this one. And it might be basic. So that's that. And that's all I have for today. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Ravelry as the Fiber Sprite, and my website is fibersprite.com. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.